Something shifted, and you felt it before you could explain it. Not in them, in you. And the moment that shift happened, something quiet but undeniable began to change in the way they respond to you. You may not see it clearly yet, but they do. Because when an empath stops extending their energy outward, the entire emotional dynamic rearranges itself. And what you're about to understand is what happens inside someone when they realize they can no longer feel you the same way as before. Before we go any further, you need to hear something clearly. What you have been feeling is not imagined. You're not exaggerating. You're not too sensitive. The confusion you have experienced does not come from illusion, but from perceiving something real without having the language to explain it. The hardest part has never been the emotion itself. It has been the feeling that you were the only one noticing what was happening beneath the surface. The silence, the inconsistency, the closeness followed by distance. It creates a kind of psychological fog where you begin to question your own perception. You may have experienced moments where someone seemed deeply present, almost connected to you in a way that felt undeniable, and then suddenly became distant without explanation. You noticed how they would appear again the moment you began to let go, how their attention returned precisely when you stopped seeking it. This pattern is not random. It follows a structure that the psyche repeats when it encounters something it cannot easily control. What you're witnessing is not simply behavior. It is a psychological response. When a person begins to feel that they are losing emotional influence over you, something inside them reacts, not necessarily consciously, but instinctively. And that reaction often does not look like clarity or honesty. It looks like distance, confusion, or subtle attempts to regain connection without fully exposing vulnerability. If you have ever reached a point where you stopped chasing, even slightly, and felt something shift afterward, you already understand this on a deeper level. That moment when you withdrew your energy, even quietly, is not a small event. It alters the entire dynamic. Because the moment you stop trying to hold something together, the other person is forced to confront what they feel without your effort compensating for it. One of the first things that happens in this situation is what we might call an ego defense. When someone feels their emotional control slipping, their ego attempts to protect them from that discomfort. Instead of expressing what they feel directly, they create space. Not because they no longer care, but because admitting care would mean admitting vulnerability. And vulnerability to an unprepared psyche feels like a loss of control. Closely connected to this is projection. When a person is not ready to face their own emotional confusion, they often displace it onto the other person. They may begin to behave in ways that subtly suggest that you are the one who is too emotional, too invested, or too intense. But in truth, what you're seeing is their internal conflict being externalized. They are trying to distance themselves from feelings they do not know how to process. Take a moment now and place your hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat. That rhythm has been responding to truth long before your mind could articulate it. Your body has known something real was happening even when your thoughts tried to dismiss it. This is important because your body often perceives authenticity before your conscious mind catches up. There is another layer to this dynamic that Carl Jung spoke about extensively, the tension between the persona and the shadow. The persona is the version of ourselves we present to the world, the identity we construct to be accepted. The shadow, however, contains everything we have not fully acknowledged within ourselves. When you enter someone's life in a meaningful way, you often come into contact with that hidden part of them. And this is where things become complicated. Because when you touch someone's shadow, you awaken emotions they have spent years avoiding. They may feel drawn to you, even deeply connected, but at the same time, unsettled. Not because of you, but because of what your presence reveals within them. And rather than facing that inner tension directly, many people oscillate between closeness and distance. Then something else begins to happen. The moment you stop pursuing, even slightly, a subtle form of panic can emerge. Not always visible, not always expressed openly, but present. This is what we might call attachment activation. Suddenly, they begin to notice your absence in ways they did not before. They check your presence indirectly, observe your behavior, or reach out in ways that appear casual but are not truly casual at all. Touch your wrist now, feel your pulse again. That sensation of life moving through you is constant. And in the same way, what is real between people does not disappear simply because it is unspoken. It shifts, it hides, it changes form, but it does not vanish as easily as people believe. When you stop chasing, something fundamental changed. Your energy, once extended outward, began to return inward. And that inward movement created space. Space that was once filled by your effort. Space that now forces the other person to experience the absence of what you were giving. This is why your stillness can feel so powerful. It is not passive. It is transformative. At this point, you might ask, what are they actually doing? Why the mixed signals, the small gestures, the indirect communication? The truth is, these are not random behaviors. They are attempts. Attempts to reconnect without risking full exposure. They are the closest form of expression that fear allows. Because direct honesty requires a level of courage that not everyone has developed. But here is where the focus must shift, because this is not only about them, it is about you. While you were trying to understand their behavior, something else was happening quietly within you. You were changing. Your reactions became slower. Your need for answers softened. Your dependence on their response began to fade. And although this may have felt like confusion or even emotional exhaustion, it was actually a form of psychological reorganization. Much of what you once believed was your personality was shaped by adaptation. You learned to read emotional environments quickly, to respond in ways that maintained connection, to prioritize understanding others over expressing yourself. These traits were not flaws, they were strategies. Strategies that helped you navigate complex emotional landscapes, often from a very early age. But as you grow, these strategies become limiting because they require you to remain attuned to others at the cost of being attuned to yourself. And eventually, the psyche reaches a point where it can no longer sustain that imbalance. This is where the shift begins, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. You begin to pull your energy back, not as a reaction, but as a necessity. And when that happens, something unfamiliar emerges, your own presence. At first, it may feel strange, even uncomfortable, because you're no longer defining yourself through someone else's response. You are encountering yourself directly without mediation. And that encounter can feel like meeting someone you have always been, but never fully known. This is not a loss. It is a return. As this return continues, subtle changes appear. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotional responses become more grounded. You begin to notice the difference between what belongs to you and what you have been carrying for others. This distinction is crucial because much of your previous confusion came from absorbing emotions that were never yours to begin with. When you start separating these layers, your inner world reorganizes. It is not sudden, it is gradual, like light returning at dawn. You may notice that your breathing feels different, that your body carries less tension, that your intuition begins to speak with more clarity. These are not coincidences. They are signs that your psyche is recalibrating. The presence that emerges from this process is what some might call a rare aura. Not because it is mystical, but because it is uncommon. It is the presence of someone who has moved through emotional complexity and returned to themselves, not untouched, but transformed. And this presence cannot exist while you're carrying what does not belong to you. You need to understand something important. Letting go of what is not yours is not abandonment. It is not rejection. It is not selfishness. It is alignment. You are not responsible for holding together what someone else is unwilling to face within themselves. You are only responsible for the integrity of your own inner world. When you begin to live from that place, your body responds. At first, there may be fatigue, a deep, almost unfamiliar tiredness. But this is not weakness. It is the difference between collapse and rest. And as this phase passes, something else emerges. A sense of space, a quiet openness, the absence of constant internal tension. This is the beginning of your light returning. There is a concept in depth psychology known as the return of life energy. When your emotional energy is no longer tied up in maintaining connections that drain you, it begins to flow back into your own life. And when that happens, you feel something awaken, not dramatically, but steadily. A sense of aliveness that had been muted begins to reappear. You start to move differently, speak differently, choose differently, not because you have become harder, but because you have become more real. And in that reality, something becomes clear. You're no longer available for dynamics that require you to lose yourself in order to maintain them. As this shift continues to unfold within you, something subtle yet undeniable begins to take shape. The identities you once carried, the roles you once adapted to, and the patterns you followed to maintain connection all start to loosen their grip. What once felt necessary now feels optional, almost distant, and in that quiet space, something long buried begins to rise. Not softly at first, but with a certain intensity that can catch you off guard. This is often the moment when you encounter a part of yourself you were never taught to recognize. Your own shadow begins to surface. Because when you are no longer occupied with carrying the emotional weight of others, your own unspoken truths find room to emerge. And very often, the first emotion you meet is not peace, but anger. Not the kind that seeks to harm, but something deeper, more honest. A kind of inner fire that says something within you was overlooked, something was not honored, something deserved more than what it received. This anger is not a flaw. It is a signal, a sign that your psyche is reclaiming parts of yourself that were once pushed aside. For a long time, your sensitivity may have been misunderstood, even by yourself. You may have believed that to be kind meant to stay silent, that to love meant to endure, that to understand meant to tolerate what diminished you. But sensitivity was never meant to erase your presence. It was meant to sharpen your perception. And now, that perception is becoming clearer. You begin to notice things that once passed you by. The subtle imbalances in how people give and take. The repeated emotional patterns that no longer feel accidental. The quiet difference between someone who is hurting and someone who refuses to take responsibility for that hurt. At first, this clarity can feel overwhelming because it removes the comfort of not knowing. But this is not confusion. This is awakening. With this awakening, new questions begin to emerge. What do you truly want? What feels aligned with who you are becoming? What kind of connection nourishes rather than drains you? These questions are not selfish. They are necessary. Because, for the first time, your life is no longer organized around emotional survival. It is beginning to reorganize itself around truth. As this happens, something even more fundamental returns: your instinct. For so long, your instinct may have been buried beneath the need to anticipate others, to adjust, to calculate, to keep harmony at any cost. But instinct does not calculate. It recognizes, it responds, it knows. And when it begins to return, it does so without asking permission. You may start to feel your body responding before your thoughts have time to explain. A quiet tension when something is not right. A soft sense of ease when something aligns. A restlessness in places that no longer feel like home. This is not anxiety. This is intelligence. Your body remembering how to guide you. Many people believe their instincts are unreliable, but that is not true. Instinct is never weak. It is only drowned out. And as the noise fades, its voice becomes unmistakable. At the same time, your perception of others begins to shift. You no longer rely only on what is said. You begin to see what is consistent. You recognize when someone is truly present and when they are simply performing presence. You feel the difference between connection that nourishes and interaction that extracts. This is discernment, and once it develops, it changes everything. Because once you see clearly, you cannot return to unseeing. You cannot go back to accepting confusion as normal or interpreting inconsistency as depth. You begin to understand that not everything needs to be solved, and not every silence needs to be filled. And most importantly, you realize that understanding someone should never come at the cost of abandoning yourself. As this realization settles in, your relationships begin to transform. Some connections naturally fall away, not through conflict, but through misalignment. You are no longer participating in the roles that once held those connections together. You are no longer absorbing what others refuse to face. And without that dynamic, certain relationships cannot continue in the same way. This can feel like loss, but what is leaving is not something whole. It is something that depended on imbalance. And in the space that follows, something new begins to enter. Connections that feel different, quieter, more grounded. People who do not require you to overextend in order to stay close. People who understand your boundaries without needing you to explain them repeatedly. These relationships may not feel intense in the way you once associated with connection, but they are stable. And for the first time, you begin to experience what it means to be met rather than needed. In this space, your sensitivity transforms. It is no longer something that exposes you to everything around you. It becomes something you can direct. You choose where your energy goes. You decide what you engage with. You become aware of what enters your inner world. And this awareness is not limiting, it is freeing. Because sensitivity without boundaries leads to exhaustion. But sensitivity with awareness becomes strength. A quiet strength begins to take root within you, not loud, not performative, but steady, a grounded presence that does not depend on validation, a sense of self that does not need to prove its worth. And this presence is felt by others, even if they cannot explain why. There is a change in how you are experienced, a calmness in your responses, a clarity in your attention, a stillness that is not avoidance, but alignment. You are no longer easily pulled into emotional turbulence, not because you have closed yourself off, but because you are anchored. And in that anchoring, something profound happens. You begin to belong to yourself. After years of adapting, merging, and responding to others, this feeling can be unfamiliar, but it is also deeply natural. You begin to recognize your own desires, your own pace, your own voice. You are no longer defined by how others respond to you. You are defined by how you respond to yourself. This is your power. Not the power to control or fix or carry, but the power to remain grounded in who you are, regardless of what happens around you. And this power does not appear all at once. It unfolds in waves. There will be moments of complete clarity where everything feels aligned. And there will be moments where old patterns resurface, not because you're going backwards, but because your psyche is still sorting through what belongs to you and what does not. Each wave becomes an opportunity to release, to refine, to return. Over time, something stabilizes. Your presence becomes consistent. Your boundaries become natural. Your energy becomes contained. You are no longer giving yourself away in places that cannot hold you. You are no longer negotiating your worth in environments that require you to diminish it. This is transformation, not dramatic, not sudden, but real. At the same time, your relationship with your inner world deepens. The unconscious, once filled with noise, becomes clearer, more responsive, more communicative. You may notice your dreams changing, becoming less chaotic, more symbolic, more guiding. Images of movement, of opening, of rediscovery begin to appear. These are not random. They are expressions of a psyche reorganizing itself around truth. And as your inner world becomes clearer, your external life begins to reflect that clarity. Opportunities align more naturally. Situations that once drained you begin to fall away. Decisions feel simpler, not because life has become easier, but because you're no longer divided within yourself. There is a sense of coherence now, a quiet alignment between who you are inside and how you move through the world. And with that alignment, desire returns. Not the kind driven by lack or longing, but the kind that arises from authenticity. You begin to feel drawn toward what genuinely interests you. Creativity awakens. Curiosity returns. You move toward life, not away from discomfort. This is vitality, and it has always been yours. It was simply hidden beneath the weight you carried. Now, as that weight lifts, you begin to feel it again, in your body, in your choices, in the way you engage with the world, a quiet aliveness that does not depend on anyone else. And this is where the final integration begins, the integration of your shadow. Because true wholeness does not come from being only light. It comes from embracing all parts of yourself. The assertiveness you once suppressed, the boundaries you avoided, the anger you denied. These are not flaws. They are essential. They are what protect your light. When you integrate them, you become both open and strong, compassionate and clear, gentle and grounded. You no longer fear your own depth because you understand it. This is the process of becoming whole. And when you reach this place, your light is no longer fragile. It does not depend on how others treat you. It becomes steady, self-sustaining. You may still feel deeply, you may still care, but you no longer lose yourself in that care. You remain centered, and from that center, something extraordinary becomes possible. You begin to live from within, not from your wounds, not from your past, not from the need to be chosen or understood, but from a quiet inner authority, a knowing of who you are. And this changes everything, because you are no longer waiting. You are no longer chasing. You are no longer trying to be seen. You are simply here, whole, present, undeniable. And if you can feel even a small part of this shift within you, then you already know something has changed, not in them, in you. And that change is the beginning of your return.